learning objective for this video is to analyze the velocity of an object relative to its time. Now to do that, we are going to use ticker timers, and from our ticker timers we're going to produce a velocity time graph. Now, to get your head around the idea of how a ticker timer works, I'm going to throw out a little analogy here. So we've got a little painting truck here, and the painter's not, the sharpest tool in the shed, so he's left one of his the lids of his paint tin open, and as a result he's got paint running through his ute and it's dripping out the back, and as he drives off, this yellow paint is dripping on the road. So the question is, from these little drips that he's left behind, can we determine the velocity that he was driving at? And the answer is yes, of course we can. So if we measure the total distance that he's traveled, which is from his first to his last dot, we can say there are 17 dots, and that means there's an interval between all of those, and there's 16 of them. And if we know exactly how long each drip takes, so let's say it is 5 seconds, we can say it's 16 times 5 seconds, so it took a total of 18 seconds. So using our formula, he did 24 meters in 8 seconds, gives us 3 meters per second on average, of course. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to the ticker timer, which is this little device here. It is essentially a electromagnet. Electromagnet's in here, and there's a bar up the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug it into the AC terminal of the power pack. It needs to be AC because AC is an alternating current, which, in simplicity means, in terms of the electromagnet, is it's going to turn it on and off 50 times a second. So it is going to go, this bar here is going to be attracted to the electromagnet just in here, and it is going to go and make a little tapping sound every time it turns on and off 50 times a second. Now, what we need to do is thread our ticker timer tape through this little slot there and under the ink pad, so that when the bar taps, it taps onto the ink pad and onto the paper. You can see it's creating these little dots. So I'll just give you a little demo here. And you can see it's creating these little dots on here 50 times a second. And I can see that I've got my little dots probably close to about 2 centimeters apart. I'm very happy with that section there. So that's the section that I'll be using. I can see that they're pretty close together. That's the section I want. It's going to work perfectly for this exercise. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is draw up some little axes here. The first one on our y-axis is going to be displacement, on our x was time. Now find your bit of ticker timer tape, and you might find that a couple of your dots aren't very clear, but find a nice big section where the intervals are nice and clear. And if there are some light ones, just get a pen and mark them out so they're a little bit darker, so that they're a bit easier to work with. See, I had a couple that were causing a bit of trouble. So now that I've done that, I'm going to choose my first point, just draw a little line behind it, and then I'm going to count 5 intervals, draw another line. You can think of it as after every 5th dot, draw a line. But make sure it's just behind the line. So you go 5, and do that for maybe about, as many as you can. I was only able to get about 5. Then I want you to label them from 1 to 5 in the correct order, so that we don't forget what order they're in after we chop them up. So chop down those lines, and we're going to stick them into our axes in their correct order. Now, if you've done it nice and neatly like I have, nice and uniformly, you'll see that they all fall within a small section. And to get a really precise scale on there, I'm just going to put in the little millimeter increments. Now, the beauty of this graph is that it is to scale, so everything you read on the displacement there is as it says. So every little increment I'm drawing there is a millimeter. So I can see now that my range of values falls between that 1 centimeter interval there, so that's perfect for me. Now I'm going to get my ruler and line it up with the dots and draw a little increment down the bottom. That's going to be our first time interval. I'm going to do that all the way across. Now, because each dot was 1/50 of a second, and we've done 5 intervals, that's going to equate to that time interval just being 0.1. So we can fill that in down the bottom. So you can use now these instructions as a reference to what you need to do. Following that, you can you'll need to analyze your velocities, and you need to mark the initial and the final, the maximum and minimum velocities you got, and work an average from that. Once you've got your average velocity, you've completed this learning activity.